All right. Hello, I don't know which microphones I even need at this point. I've got so many microphones. If I get you all to take a seat, we'll get kicked off in a second. That's to those of you in the room. To those of you online, which is microphone number 2, which doesn't do anything in the room at all, will be with you very shortly. All right. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. It's good to see a whole bunch of familiar faces, but some new faces too, which is really, really cool. We're obviously the Atlassian Community London. We do this probably once a month. For those of you who are kind of new to us, sometimes we live stream, sometimes we don't. Today we are. Always a bit of extra logistical fun in the room, but it's always worth it. And so you're very welcome if you're joining us online as well. So a quick set of introductions. Checking my clicker is working. Good, it is. So I'm Bruce Cullen. I'm Chief Product Officer at a small startup called IDO. So nothing to do with Atlassian at all. We're very focused on Microsoft Intune. Hands up if you know Intune. No hands. One hand. I'm impressed. 2 hands. Wow. Okay, I was expecting 0 hands. So that's more than I was expecting. Don't worry, I'm not going to talk about Intune or anything related to that world. But that's me. I'm an Atlassian community champion for the London chapter. And with me, I have Stuart Cable. Stuart, put your hand up, please. Stuart's at the back over there. He's joining us. This is his office that we're kindly stealing. So thank you very much, Stuart, and to Cutover for letting us steal your office. We have Jay. Jay's just around the corner. You would have met him on the way in. Jay is a fellow community champion. And we have our newest member, Abigail, who is somewhere in the room. Around the corner also. Hello, Abigail. Who's joining us. Abigail works at Lloyd's. Great to have her on the team for her first event. So this is us. None of us, as you'll note, work for Atlassian. We're all community champions, which means we do this for the fun and because we're all a bit mad in some form, which is good. So that's us. Quick QR code scan for those of you who are new to the Atlassian London community. This is our QR code for our LinkedIn page. It's where you go for the latest news on what's going on with this community, like next events is the main thing that goes on there, let's be honest. So please do give us a follow if you're not already. It helps with many things, but in particular, keeping up to date with news. And that's pretty much all I had to say before I bring on our speaker. So before we do that, though, quickly, can I have a show of hands? Who is familiar with Grafana in some shape or form? That's almost the whole room, which is in no way surprising. Grafana have been around for a very long time. I was saying to Simon, our speaker today, that my last company was a dashboarding and data visualization company. So for a while, these guys were my competition, so I'm very aware. But now I don't work for the former company. I can say they have some very good products, and so we're going to hear all about them today. So without further ado, I'm pretty much going to hand over to Simon. So Simon, you are a senior DevRel, I believe that's the shortened term, at Grafana Labs. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm Simon Prickett. I'm developer advocate, as we call it at Grafana, which means I work in the product group. I'm not marketing or sales. I'm joined by Eva at the back, who's one of our community managers, who's based down here in London. I'm actually from Nottingham, so I've travelled down today. And what I'm going to do is introduce what we do at Grafana beyond what you might know about what we do, and look at it from a couple of perspectives, how we can apply observability to running software such as Jira, Bitbucket, Confluence, the Atlassian products, and also how we can observe the work that's being done inside those products, which is kind of more my background. So through API integrations and dashboarding of where we're at with the sprint in Jira or something like that, for example. We've got a couple of little demos, and hopefully everybody can hear me and everyone can hear me online. I've got 2 mics on here, so this is a sort of strange tech fest, but I think we have to do a little shuffle so we can present.
Well, I unplug and you plug in, so that's for you.
That's me.
That's me unplugging. And now we fail and do the live stream dance. We play around with cables.
And hope
there's always the downside of, even if in the room, you've still got cables to mess around with. And then Simon, if I could just
let me
and then we'll get going.
Okay, so we've got something that looks reasonable there.
Sounds good.
Are we? Oh, there we go.
There you go. And now let's check it's working.
Entire screen, screen 2.
Put that up there, like that. And then I'll just double check that me unplugging audio source didn't make live streaming go nuts. It didn't.
Yay.
And then I'm going to sit down. Thank you.
Okay. Right, so I'll try and come out of behind this big stack of laptops for the people in the room here. So hello, this session we are going to talk about observability with the LGTM stack, which you may or may not know what that is. And we are going to do that with mostly some slides, but also a bit of a demo. So I'm Simon Prickett. I'm a senior developer advocate here at Grafana Labs. I say here we're a completely virtual company, so we all work from our own locations. I'm based in Nottingham in England, mostly work from home, and I'm part of an extremely distributed team that has members as far west as Seattle, and we have folks in Asia Pacific and throughout Europe, so we're extremely distributed. I've been doing software for probably about 30-something years now. Started out as a software engineer doing C++, became a software architect, started doing technical training, so the sort of thing where I would come to your company Monday to Friday and train you how to do something. And that sort of eventually morphed into doing it online and then developer advocacy. So for those of you who don't know, developer advocacy is kind of like it's teaching folks how to use and be successful with, and also it's being like the first user of the product internally. So if you've ever seen the film, is it Mickey 17, Mickey some number? I'm your expendable. I'm the person that gets to fall down all the nasty holes in the pre-release software whilst trying to build something with it, so you don't have to. So it's kind of like a dual role. So I'm here today in my sort of talking to people about software role, but a lot of what I do in my day-to-day 9 to 5 is actually trying out things that aren't quite available yet, observing that they're broken or could be done better, and providing feedback to teams. Outside of doing this, and sometimes with doing this, I'm quite into Internet of Things. So you'll see me talking a lot about Raspberry Pis and microprocessors and that sort of thing. And yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not actually all that active on there, but it links to all of my other things. So today we're going to have a look at Grafana's LGTM stack. What does that even mean? And we're going to look at what observability means these days, what Grafana Labs as the company is and what it does beyond what you might know about, a little bit about our integration philosophy, and then we're going to take a very quick look at some Grafana basics, so how to get started with a Grafana stack, and then apply that to some Atlassian products. And finally, I'll do a little bit of a demo of how we can link Jira to Grafana dashboards and how we can link something with Bitbucket as well. So there's some challenges with observing your system these days. So what do we mean about observing? We generally mean there's probably two audiences here. So if you're responsible for running software and making sure it's healthy, we kind of mean observing the state of that software. You know, is it using too much memory, too much process? Is it generally behaving itself? Is it about to run out of disk? Or if you're more on the business side, or if you're in software engineering, you might be observing a process that is something like building a software product. So you might be interested in, you know, how far through a sprint are we, and how is everybody doing? What have they got on their plates? Or if you're using something like continuous integration, you might be interested in knowing how much time does this take to run, what the trend is as we continue to adopt this tool, and so forth. There's kind of two sides to this. And really, this is the sort of overwhelmed slide. You need to sort of zoom in and move around this, but We're obviously not going to have a look at anything on here particularly, but the point is software has become increasingly complicated these days. So you no longer have like a monolithic thing that you deploy that is sort of our software. And with all of these sort of different microservices and things that are linked together, they themselves become simpler, but the sort of interactions between them become more complex, which means that tracking and tracing issues and even what the state of anything is as you go through these is very, very complicated. So how do we sort of figure out what we're doing here, and how do we detect issues and problems before they actually affect people? Well, what we generally need to do is have some sort of way of seeing what's going on, making sense of it, seeing where problems are, and taking actions. And this applies in both of these populations. So, if you're running software, it's seeing what's going on and making sense of it. Might be looking at a Kubernetes cluster that's running an application. It might be looking at the performance of your, say, Bitbucket server install. Or if you're in the other population, it might be looking at the performance of your software engineering team or some business process that's being managed through software. And there's the old thing of you can't manage what you can't manage what you don't measure or something like that, but you can't prevent what you can't see. So without observability, essentially, you've got quite a complicated black box. So you can't see anything in there. In some ways, that's good because, sort of ignorance is bliss. But in other ways, it means that when things happen, everything is essentially a big murder mystery. So what actually happened, especially in more modern software, working that out can take a heck of a long time and can take a sort of fairly senior level of detective. And also, if you're moving at any sort of velocity, the size and shape of your software changes all the time. So basically, you can't prevent what you can't see. This also applies to monitoring people and processes as well as software. So once you add some sort of observability system, the aim here is to take away that black box and turn it into a glass box so you can actually see inside. And seeing inside is fine, and you would see what's going on, but you also need to understand what it actually means. And you want something that can tell you when some threshold or some systems issue has happened and alert you to it, so that you're not spending your whole time sort of staring into this now glass box trying to figure out what it all means. So that's partly where Grafana comes in. So Grafana, in this context, is an entire observability platform. So the LGTM stack is an entire solution for observability, of which Grafana dashboards that most of the people who put their hands up saying they've used Grafana, I would imagine have used Grafana dashboards. And that's probably the one component of our tool set that you're familiar with. So they help you to understand what normal looks like and then what abnormal looks like, and raise alerts and, in some cases, take automated actions when abnormal happens. So before we sort of go into how we do that, I wanted to take a minute to go through what we call the pillars of observability. So what those are. So probably the most well-known thing is metrics. So metrics are basically something that can be boiled down to a number. So it might be, how many people have we got in this room right now? Or how many jobs are in the queue? Or how many cars are in the drive-through waiting to be served? Or how much fuel is left in our fuel tank? And metrics allow us to instrument things, and then we can determine if something is happening, because over time, we can observe a metric and get a baseline for what normal looks like, and then observe that we've deviated from normal, and then we might want to do something about that. So We can also, for example, run metrics against one version of a service or a product, and then have another version of it, run those metrics again, and see if that new version is taking up more or less resource or whatever it is. So once we know what is happening with the metrics, we've got something that's an abnormal situation, then we want to know, well, what is happening? So something's happening, logs tell us what is happening. So we need some logs, and we need something to store the logs and make sense of them. So logs can also tell us about errors that are happening at a given time. And if we have timestamps for the logs and the metrics, we can correlate those two things together. And the next step along the line with this is having traces. So traces are important, especially in sort of microservices or distributed systems, because traces allow us to follow something through different components. So it's very unlikely that an issue or a problem is caused by a single component on its own. Quite often these days, it'll be multiple components. And traces allow us to follow through all of those and hopefully pinpoint where errors are occurring. And traditionally, these were like the three things in observability. But now we also have profiles. So profiles help us to narrow down issues in an application code base. So can show us things like CPU time and memory, how those are being utilized, and where in the code these issues occur. So basically, metrics tell us whether something's happening, logs tell us what it is, profiles give us some sense of how do I fix it, and traces where is it happening. Ideally, you want some sort of system or solution that makes sense of all of these together. And, excuse me, if we take all of these pillars together and have a holistic approach to observability, then it's easier to detect and investigate problems, especially when our systems are complicated. So Grafana, the LGTM platform, gives us a single place to sort of seamlessly store and move between metrics, logs, and traces, and also profiles. So we sort of talked a little bit about what the problems are here and what we're trying to solve. If I said to everybody here, what is Grafana? I'm willing to bet that most people would say dashboards. You've probably used or seen a Grafana dashboard somewhere. If you haven't used them, you've probably seen one out in the real world somewhere. We have a channel in our company Slack called Dashboards in the Wild, which is where staff have spotted one of our dashboards being used to monitor, I don't know, a car wash or a rocket launch or something. Visitors to a museum, I think was a recent one in Manchester. So people are generally familiar with the dashboarding. The project itself originated in around 2013. There was a guy in Sweden who wanted to do some better UI on top of graphite metrics. So he started a dashboarding project called Grafana. It actually came from Elasticsearch's Kibana, hence sort of the name. And we've been building on that ever since. So nowadays, we are a company of, this says 1,200, I think it's maybe more like about 1,500 people now. We're very, very remote and spread out. We operate across something like 30, 40 countries. We don't have any offices. And most people would know us for either Grafana dashboards or work with Prometheus, which is a metrics scraping time series database that we employ quite a lot of the open source contributors for. However, we have a whole stack called the LGTM stack that we will sort of look into here. So I won't go through all of these things, but basically the other thing that I would like you to take away from this is we have a cloud product. We obviously make money from that cloud product. We also are incredibly invested in open source. So the majority of the cloud product is us hosting the open source for you. You can take that and do whatever you want with it as well. And we're also really big into standards. So we'll look at open telemetry a little bit, which is a way of getting data into and out of our systems or other people's systems. So we recognize that that there's not a good business in locking you into things. So this is sort of going back to what I said earlier, what most people think of Grafana, and I'm guilty of this. So I joined Grafana in April of this year. My previous 2 jobs were with database companies as a developer advocate. And I would use Grafana as a visually interesting way of showing data stories in databases, because data at rest is really dull. If I stood up here and showed you like a spreadsheet and we ran some SQL queries, that's not very interesting. But if I can show you a dashboard that has graphs and gauges and maps and a lot of stuff going on, it's a lot more interesting. So most people come to Grafana through the dashboarding tool, and most people get their data into the dashboard by leaving it where it is. So you run queries against things like GitHub or Datadog or what else? MySQL, Postgres. You can run queries against APIs that we'll look at shortly. And we have a lot of integrations for lots of different systems. So once you've got all of that data into a Grafana dashboard, you can kind of mix and mash it and link it together on key values and build some really interesting visualizations that covers one or more of these data sources. That's what most people answer to what is Grafana is. And Grafana, what we call Grafana, which is the dashboarding product. So our GitHub org is Grafana, and then the product's Grafana, so we call it Grafana. That is like one part of this stack here. So there's 4 things in here. It's the LGTM stack, which you could say that looks good to me. It's got 4 components, and those aim to match up to those pillars of observability that we spoke about. So the first one is Loki. It's a database. It's for logs. It's a log aggregation database. And it has its own LogQL language that's sort of inspired by Prometheus's PromQL. And it's our solution for storing and managing logs at scale. All of these are open source products. The stack itself is open source, so you can take it and use it yourself, or you can get it from us in the cloud, or you can buy it from us as enterprise and install it and we'll support you. So the G in LGTM is Grafana. So this is the one that everybody's probably heard of. So Grafana is the database and analytics platform. It's what you see producing all of the dashboards. It's essentially a project that pulls data in through lots and lots of integrations, which you can either use as or build yourself. And you can then do metrics, logs, profiles, traces, link them all together. You can pull data in from other systems. So we'll look at a Jira integration. We'll look at an API level integration with Bitbucket. And at the end of the day, you can visualize them, but there's also an alerting component. So if you wanted Grafana to detect based on things happening in multiple different systems that some condition has occurred that you can define, it might be there's, I don't know, certain amount of CPU on one thing and 3 stories in the backlog on Jira and some other random combination of things, you can get Grafana to start doing alerts. And alerts can go to all sorts of destinations, and those could include things like Opsgenie or Jira Service Management, or they could include things like, let's post it to a webhook and take some action, or let's email Simon and get him out of bed, or let's put something in a Slack channel, or let's do all of these things. The alerting platform is also extremely configurable, so you can sort of say, how long before this alert is really a thing? How long does it occur before we care? And how long does it need to go on before we stop caring? And at what point do we stop caring? And also, how often do we evaluate whether this alert has occurred? So, some things you might want to calculate once a day. Some things you might want once every 30 seconds. So T in the stack is Tempo. It's essentially a distributed tracing database. So it's used for traces. It also has a language called TraceQL, which again is inspired by PromQL. So where we've created database products, we've tried to make them queryable in a fairly familiar way, so you don't have this cliff of learning all of this stuff. And then finally, the M in the stack is Mimir, which is essentially a stand-in for Prometheus. It's a time series metrics database. You can send data to it through Prometheus Remote Write if you're already familiar with doing that. And we have a tool that we'll come onto later for scraping things from Prometheus endpoints or JMX metrics endpoints, which I think like Jira and Bitbucket both have those, and pulling them into a Mimir database. So you can then build dashboards based on those. So I'm just going to check the live stream status here. I think we're okay. So thank you. So across the whole stack, this gives you a single unified platform for observability. Most of this is going to be for the sort of observability of observing, running software. For something like, I want to see what the status of my team's work is in Jira, you mostly use just Grafana itself, because you can pull all the data from Jira. You don't have to ship it to us and replicate it, and we'll look at that. So Grafana has what's called a big tent philosophy. So that basically means we want you to use our products without having to go all in on us necessarily. So you can pull data from where it lives at the moment, or you can take data that lives in our products and take them somewhere else. So we are extremely big into open telemetry, which is a standards-based solution data into and out of metrics backends. And also with Grafana, the dashboarding, you can pull things in through APIs and integrations. You don't have to sort of batch load data into Grafana, the product, to then run a dashboard against it. We have hundreds of integrations. You can also build your own. So you can build a data source that extends to different products. Or you can use something that we'll look at later. We have something called the Infinity data source, and it basically works with REST APIs or other JSON type APIs, which makes things very extensible. This also includes other tracing and metrics and so forth. So if you don't want to use ours, you have something already, you can use an integration or write your own. So what we've got here as a whole, as a company, is what we like to call an open and composable observability stack. So the element that you probably know about, visualization, so dashboards and all of the data sources. And again, the philosophy is to try and keep the data where it is in this case. So you don't have to replicate data in order to use Grafana, including mashing up data from multiple sources. So you can make two queries to different backends if they've got a common key or something that we can match things up on. You can use what are called transforms in the dashboard, and you can basically produce a single sort of synthesized metric that's based on those two separate pools of data. And down the bottom here, we have also in our stack started to provide some general building blocks. So you probably don't want to build a metrics database. You probably don't want to build a logs database. So you can use Grafana's ones. Again, they're all open source, and we are sort of big into standards. So open telemetry, Prometheus, we don't want to lock you into this. So again, we're then sort of building on top of this basis, we're building some sort of higher level capabilities. So alerting with increasingly, everything seems to be about AI today, but sort of AI, ML, alert patterns. Did something happen? Did something really matter? What have we seen before? What can we learn from that? We're also working on things like service level management and root cause analysis. So you can, with Grafana products, figure out what happened, where it happened, link that to a pull request that fixed it, open an incident, declare an incident, inform people, all of these things. And ultimately, we're building things on top of that. We're not really here to talk about testing or incident response management, but know that we also have solutions for those things. So we're here to talk about observability, and we're mostly talking about these two, so application and infrastructure observability. Grafana also has products that are not within my knowledge space in the front end area. So if you wanted to observe what the user sees as performance of a web application, feed that data into our stack, and then do dashboarding, alerting, incident management stuff with that, we have products for those. I'm not the person for those, but I can point people at the person who is if you're interested in them. This is a bit salesy, and this is a meetup, so lots of companies use us. We'll not worry about that. And also, we're in the Gartner Magic Quadrant, so that's good to know. But again, this is a meetup, so we're going to not do sales things. So, having been through what we do and what we have, I wanted to sort of show you quickly how you get started with some things, and specifically some Atlassian things. I'm going to use a mix of the slides and a demo for that. So I said earlier, all of our products are open source, so you can either go grab them and do whatever you want with them and run them yourselves, or you can buy support from us, or you can run them in the cloud. And I'm using a cloud demo today because it's easy to set up and run, and also because our free plan is actually really useful for stuff. I would say that because I work for Grafana, but prior to working for Grafana, I used the Grafana Cloud free plan for all of my Grafana-based developer advocacy database demos. So you can get a lot done in the free plan, and it basically goes forever as long as you stay within the limits of it, which are pretty generous. So generally, what you're going to do, let's assume we've signed up for Grafana Cloud. It doesn't matter. We could be running this locally as well. What you're probably going to want to do is pull some data into a dashboard or observe some applications. So first thing you would normally do is go and add a connection. We have a lot of integrations for different things. So we'll actually have a look at the integration for the Macintosh that's running this demo at the minute. But also know we can sort of look at different things such as Influx or MySQL, or my background has been Redis and Postgres databases. We also have a data source for Jira, and we have something called the Infinity data source that deals with APIs, and that's how we're going to get data out of Bitbucket, for example. So once we've told Grafana where the data lives, we generally want to start adding visualizations. So we're just going to go straight to building a dashboard out of something so we can see what's in the data. And when we do that, what we're going to do is essentially select a data source for each visualization. So on a given dashboard, you'd have multiple panels. Each panel has a visualization. It might be a bar chart. It might be a heat map. It might be a physical map. It might be just a great big number, a stat panel. Each of those can come from different data sources. So, one dashboard doesn't have to be all my Jira stuff. It could be Jira plus the weather plus Bitbucket plus some other internal system that you've got. And also, it's sort of, let's see what's on the next, nope, let's go back. It's sort of obscured, but down here, we're building a query. So we'll go to the data source, and we'll tell it what the query is, and that's going to depend on what the data source is. It might be SQL. In Jira, it's JQL, the Jira query language. In other things, it might be JSON-ARTA or JQ expression to deal with JSON. And you can have multiple of these queries, so you can talk to different data sources to get data for a single panel. So if you want a single graph that has data from like Jira and I don't know, MySQL and somewhere else, you can absolutely do that. So don't think that, one panel equals one data source and you have to like manually put these things together. And then this is roughly what a dashboard looks like when you've built one out. This dashboard is just a screenshot. We'll look at the live one in a bit. It's my actual Macintosh. So we have another component to the system that I'll talk about in a minute. That is running on my Macintosh. It is pushing metrics into Grafana Cloud, and then Grafana Cloud is rendering these. And we can set alerts on them and so on. So if I start to run out of disk, I might get emails or whatever it is. This is another example dashboard that I built based on something completely different. So here in the UK, we have something called a carbon intensity API. So we can tell from our electricity generator what the components of our current electricity supply are. So is my electricity coming from nuclear or natural gas or wind or solar or whatever? And there's an API for this, and you can quite easily, using our Infinity data source, take APIs like this, pull data from them, write some simple JQ expressions that you probably know already, and get data out. So here we're looking at the time, it looks like South Wales had the dirtiest electricity and North Scotland had the cleanest. And where I was in the East Midlands, we had a fairly low carbon index, and we're mostly consisting of wind. And we could sit this and make it refresh. And this is both an interesting demo and somewhat practical, right? So I could, for example, if I was really concerned about the climate, look at the renewables component for the East Midlands and send myself an alert when it hits a certain trigger point, and then go out and turn the car charger on, or boil the kettle, or run the washing machine, or whatever it is. And because the alerting system goes to multiple destinations, including webhooks, I could have it actually take that action for me if I got a smart home set up. So you can go from sort of looking at things to being told you should take actions to actually having those actions taken for you quite quickly. And then here we're looking at something that is actually one of my pet projects. So I have some IoT devices at home. They're little Raspberry Pi Picos. They run MicroPython, and they use what's called Prometheus Remote Write. They send data into Grafana Cloud. So because they're tiny little devices with no storage, I am sending the data to Grafana and having Grafana keep it. And then we're building a dashboard that looks at, in this case, the state of my office. And also a little bit, I was interested in the state of the device. So what's the RAM like on the device, and how's the garbage collector working in MicroPython? So you can observe extremely big and complicated systems, but you can also observe something that costs like £6.50 and lives under my desk somewhere. So talked a bit about what you can and can't do, and we've sort of implied a component that I haven't mentioned really yet. So you're either observing infrastructure or applications. This doesn't apply to observing processes. So this is not like we're observing a team's work based on what the state of Jira is. Well, when we're observing software or something that lives in a data center or doesn't have APIs necessarily, generally what we need in observability is something called a collector. So that's something that is going to go and get metrics from that software and do something with it. It's going to send it to an observability backend. So for us, that's the LGTM stack. And then we're going to be able to visualize it. So for us, that's the Grafana component of the LGTM stack. And as you might expect, as an observability vendor, we have a product called Alloy that acts as the collector. So if you're responsible for running software and you're running it in like a Kubernetes cluster or a private data center or something, and you want to send us the data to our cloud, or you want to ship it out to somewhere else, we have a component called Alloy. It's an open telemetry compatible collector. So you can also use it to send it to somewhere else if you want that isn't us, or you can use someone else's compatible collector if you prefer theirs. And what that's going to do is send data out to the cloud or wherever it goes, so we can then visualize it. That's what's running on my Macintosh here and is driving the database of what the Mac is currently up to. So this is an Atlassian group, so I wanted to have some stuff that was Atlassian specific, and I've tried to sort of deal with two separate audiences. So if you're responsible for running software, then you're going to be interested in observing the execution of the actual software. Generally, if you want to get metrics out of software, you can expose a Prometheus metrics endpoint or use JMX. Atlassian software seems to be pretty good at doing that, especially the JMX stuff. And then you can either run Grafana in your own environment and run some sort of collector, or have Prometheus itself, the open source project, running and sending data or pulling data, having Grafana look at that. Or you can run our collector and send it to hosted Grafana somewhere in the cloud or wherever it happens to be. So that's just from the Atlassian documentation for Bitbucket. It's actually extremely simple to scrape this stuff out of these software products because standards are your friend. Things get a little bit more interesting with things like Opsgenie, and Jira Service Management. So we integrate with those in a way that they can be a contact point for alerts. So if something happens and you've configured in Grafana, or a sort of business level user configured in Grafana that we care about this and it should alert, then you can have it send it to Opsgenie or Jira Service Management, and then do whatever you do with that in that world. So whatever your workflow for those things is, they can originate through a Grafana query that's mashed up data from all sorts of different data sources. And that also applies to Jira itself. So there's a couple of things you can do. You can run JQL queries and get the data out for dashboards. So you could pull the status of a sprint or some label or whatever it is you want to run a JQL queries for. Mix it with other stuff, and we'll look at how that works. But equally, you can use it as an alert destination. So if something happens and you're not using, say, Jira Service Management, you can have Grafana directly raise an issue in Jira when something happens, and then you can have Grafana close it when the thing stops happening. And Bitbucket, I had a quick look at just as another Atlassian product. We don't have an integration for that, which is sort of sad face, but also good, because it means I can demonstrate our API integration. So for Bitbucket, we can just use the REST API. So this is a call from the documentation. And we have a data source that allows us to directly call this, use appropriate authentication, and then run JQ or JSON alter queries against it to get data into Grafana itself. So with that said, that's slides. So what I wanted to do was try and find the right things and show you a couple of demos. So we've got, this is my Grafana stack. If we want to go look at what is going on in my house right now, you can see it's reasonably warm in there. But this is actually live data that's being pushed into Grafana Cloud from 4 or 5 little POWs. So the data is being stored in Grafana Cloud in this case. And all of this to Grafana looks like Prometheus. So it all lives in Mimir, our metrics database. If we go and take a look at the electric carbon intensity, you can see what's going on with the UK carbon intensity at the minute. And if we change a region here, this is coming from a public API, so there's nothing private here. Let's see how London's doing. And turn off Scotland. So actually, yeah, all right now. So generally the electricity that's powering this meetup is mostly coming from wind by the looks of it, and we're not doing too bad on renewables. This is a dashboard that, if you turn on all of the regions, has a lot of data. So if we just do this, then what you'll see is lots and lots of stuff here, which some of you might then be thinking, oh, he's using an API, and sometimes APIs cost money, and if we build complicated visualizations, I might like use up tons of API calls. What we're doing here is we're using a single API call to the carbon intensity API. It's getting all of the data, and then all of these panels here, their data source in Grafana is actually this table down the bottom, which I don't actually need to show in the dashboard, I just chose to. So there's a single call that goes and gets this. We hit the API once, so if this cost me £1 to hit it or something, which it doesn't, then that would have cost £1. And I can then have as many panels as I want that pull from this data and transform it into different things. So we don't have to hit APIs hard. We try to be a good citizen so you don't burn through rate limits, or you don't want observability. The problem with giving people observability is they're then like, well, what if I put it on a 1-second refresh or live stream? It's constantly hitting the data sources. So we are aware of that, and we give you solutions for those things. And then the last thing I wanted to show on here was I've got an Atlassian dashboard. Maybe I don't. Where did I put it? I didn't put it in the Atlassian folder, of course. So I've got a dashboard here that's visualizing something in Cloud Jira. So it's looking at the current state of a Kanban board. And you can see what's going on here. I've set some triggers and thresholds. And you can also see what was most recently updated. So how does this work? If I pick something fairly simple like this and we edit it, what you'll see is I've got a Jira data source set up here, which is just my Jira cloud URL and an appropriate, I think I'm using basic authentication, but you can use JWTs or whatever the other authentications are. JQL project here, a JQL query here, that results in some data from Jira. And then what I'm doing is just reducing that data. So what comes back, I think, is the issue numbers. I'm just reducing that to account of them using the Grafana transforms. And then we've got some over here. We've got some Grafana thresholds that basically says, if it's anything less than 4, that's green. So, that's visually quite a good thing. If there's more than 4 things in progress, that's orange. Maybe the team's getting overloaded. And if there's like 6 or more, then let's assume that's a bad thing. So we can visualize things in Jira like that, and these are different visualizations that have different queries. This is just pulling back raw data and displaying it. And we can see this is live because I've got 5 things in the backlog, and that's my most recent issue. Is it SKP 19? I can go over to my board here, and we could do something like this and drop that back into the backlog, and what we should then see is backlog's gone to 6. The most recently modified issue is now 17, the one that I just dragged, and all the other numbers have adjusted accordingly. There's actually 2 backlog things here. So why is that? So this one here is done with the Jira integration. It's just a JQL statement in the form. This one here shows that if you wanted something that was beyond what you could do in that, but you can do in the API, we can also use something called Grafana Infinity that I sort of mentioned a couple of times before. That's powering some of those other dashboards. And we can point straight at Jira's REST API or Bitbucket's REST API. We can authenticate to that, and then we can basically work with the data that we get back. So in this case, this query is returning, if I turn on table view, it's literally just returning a number. So we're just displaying that. But if we go and look at what I've got down here, this is talking to my cloud Bitbucket that I've just got a repository set up against. We can edit this, and we can see that I've got, this is just looking at the commits endpoint from the Bitbucket API and dumping it out as a table. Then I'm using that table further down to just do a little bit of a graph of how many commits have I had by day. This doesn't hit Bitbucket again. It uses that So it uses that panel as the source. So we've already hit the API, we don't need the data again. And then we're doing some transformations on this inside Grafana to make sense of that, bucket the data down to individual days and put it in the graph. And if we've got this right, what we should also have is, no, I don't want to save my changes. We should also have, this is slightly awkward sort of, because this isn't mirrored. So I set up an alert in Grafana. And I set up an alert for, let me know when there's too many instances or too many tickets in the backlog and do something about it. And that's currently alerting because the threshold for that was, I think, 5. Yeah, so I set an alert that basically says, I want to know when the number of issues returned by my JQL query is more than 5, and I'm looking at what's in the backlog. And if we go look in the backlog over here, you'll see that we have 4 here and 2 here, 6. So the alert's firing. And where does it go? It's actually sending me emails, but it could be sent anywhere. And if we pull one of these out and start doing it again, then order is returned to the world, and eventually that alert will stop firing because Grafana will realize that there are no longer more than 6 in there. So that was basically what I had. What we're going to do now is try and switch back to slides and not lock the computer. Sort of interested in all of this and you want to learn more about what we're doing as a company or how to use the products, we have lots of resources, and really I try and minimize the number of things that I tell people to try and remember. So I would say go check out play.grafana.org. So what that is it's a huge collection of dashboards that you as an end user can just go to without logging in or authenticating to anything and look at how they're built, look at the queries, and they're all organized by what they do. So the carbon intensity one that I showed is on there. We've got, I think, a Jira one that is linked to a Jira instance that we maintain with just some test data in it. And we've got all sorts of different things. And then similarly to Atlassian, we also have a pretty active community. We also run meetups, they're called Grafana and Friends, where we get our champions and other folks to come talk about what they're doing with the product stack. We have a Slack and a forums that we'd love to see you on. And also, if you're sort of interested in that, ever at the back is one of our community managers who's here today as well. So with that and the microphone falling off of my head, hopefully that's worked okay. Thank you for coming, and hopefully if I leave you with one thing, it's like Grafana is more than the dashboarding. Please remember that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'm going to do a little bit of unplugging because I have a few final slides, and then there's more beer and pizza for those in the room, but not for those online. Give me 2 seconds. The joys of many laptops and many cables.
Come out of the way.
Okay. That one? Oh, yeah, I've got a real microphone. Perfect. So, before we move on with anything else, can I just see if there are any questions for Simon? Yes, one at the back, one at the front. I'm going to go back first. You have your hand first. Yes, Simon. Yes.
Not the presentation actually, or just a little was to find out source was apart from source was in their Atlassian pages and suites. What surprised me, opened my eye actually with the presentation, was the data sourcing from Elastic, which basically Elastic uses Kibana. Elastic does most of the things you do within the file itself. So what's that? I mean, that got me confused completely. You know, when you mentioned data sourcing from Elastic. Elastic exactly has the metrics for the language you just protect.
Yeah. So Grafana itself is so named because it came from Kibana. It was originally a fork of Kibana, and I'm not a huge expert, but basically what we've done is continue to build other data sources on top of it. So you don't have to bring all your data into an Elastic data source or any specific data source. And we, as a company, are focused on visualization, so not, you know, or other things. I don't know if that helps, but that's.
That was kind of very opener for me because when I looked at the data sourcing, you know, for analytics, and I just saw Elastic something.
But yeah, Grafana totally came about because our founder got frustrated with, he wanted something like Kibana for the graphite database. So he just took Kibana, forked it and started working on that and then published it as Grafana, and it's been going 13, 14 years since now.
There's another question at the front. I'm coming
I do think.
You showed the visualization with the metrics coming from the API.
Yeah, so basically when you start the dashboard, Grafana, the platform, is going to go and pull it with a backend component. You can tell it to cache it for a little while if you want it to. So it'll live inside Grafana, the server that's running the visualizations.
When you run the query, do you still query the API? It's just kind of transparently caching it.
Yeah, or you can turn off the caching and go straight through. And what I was trying to get at was you can reuse data in multiple panels. So you can do one query that's like super wide and gets everything. And then you don't have to make like, 20 panels is 20 queries because you get what's called like a big O of M problem. Otherwise, if you just smash the API with tons of things, and then it either looks like a DDoS attack or you blow through. So I have something that tracks flights with FlightAware's API. And if you behave, FlightAware's API can be free, but they've got my credit card on file. If you don't behave, it goes really expensive really quick. Ask me how I know in another meetup talk where I do that. So yeah, you can call APIs, you can be fairly kind on them, and you can kind of tell Grafana to hang on to the result for a little while. So if it's like something that's gonna, if it's, I don't know, real-time trading, you probably want no delay. If it's the weather, then hour or two, probably fine. But it'll live in the Grafana server, so no matter how many people hit it from different front ends, they're not all gonna hit the API.
Yeah, my favorite example of a paid-for API that costs the earth is the AWS Cost Management API. The irony, pulling your AWS cost data, it's very expensive. Anyway, are there any other questions? Over here, coming around this way. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much for the talk. My first question is, when you're using Grafana Cloud, can you manage it with Terraform or something declarative? I mean, to have predictable dashboards and see changes, so on and so forth.
Not entirely my area, but I can get back to you on that, or?
The answer is yes.
The answer is yes. I was going to say we can also do dashboards as code and so forth, so you can manage them like that. And we're also doing bring your own cloud offerings, and where we would manage it for you, but also you can manage them. I'm from the application data level sort of background rather than the ops background.
This one. You also mentioned profiles and traces, and I haven't seen demos of those parts. Did you get right that if I go to playgrafana.org, I will find some examples of traces there as well? Or...
Yeah, there's. I'll try and get the URL, and can we update the meetup links afterwards or get out to people? So some folks on our team built this really cool thing called Game of Traces, which is like a whole thing that you can play around with, which is like one of those, you know, you're in, I think what you do is you sort of build armies and set villages at war with each other, and it shows the whole tracing and profiling solution really, really nicely. So I would recommend you look at that. But if you just Google Grafana Game of Traces, there's a really nice conference video from KubeCon and all of that, but we can get you the URL for it. It's open source and it all runs in Docker.
Okay, you mentioned HTTP API integration in Grafana. And is it just about plain HTTP API, or you have like others for GraphQL to make it more comfortable to write queries?
Yeah, so it does do, it does JQ, JSON, it does something with Graph that I've not played with myself, but it's definitely in there. You can do GraphQL stuff. And once it's in there, you can do a lot of transform. I tend to do a lot of transforms with JQ because I'm familiar with it, but then you can also take that and do further Grafana sort of GUI level transforms if you like. So use our built-in drag and drop ones.
And last but not least, I think when you was showing live demo, when you close dashboard after editing, every time kind of annoying thing, it appears again and again, disguises changes.
That is a whack-a-mole that we seem to be.
Like your backlog, or I mean, to make it more obvious, you know, for users that you basically didn't change anything important and you discarded these. You know, because for me as a user, this is plus, I was every time confused. I was really scared the closest editing.
Yep.
Because I wasn't really sure.
I experienced that as well. So that is something that we know about, and when people internally see it, it gets reported on our internal Slack and looked at. But yeah, it is a thing of like, I guess state management is hard. I'm not a front-end developer, but yeah, sometimes that will happen if you go and do something and it's like, haven't changed anything. It wants me to save. What do I do here? Or sometimes it will say it wants you to save, and then the save button's not active because there's nothing to do, so you can just cancel it.
Thank you, good questions. Should also say there are two other answers for getting answers to your Grafana questions. So Grafana and Friends London community, which Simon mentioned earlier, presumably will cover all of the topics and more. And also, Simon, you're very welcome to come back for another
one. Yeah, I'm back here for Grafana and Friends in October 14, is it, or something? Yeah, October the 14th at wherever Just Eat is. I'm not from London, I don't know. Ironically, they don't provide food either. But
sounds good. Are there any other questions in the room? One here.
Hi, thank you for the presentation.
Thanks for coming.
So you may have already touched on this, but I was a little bit late for the initial presentation. When it comes to security and data locality, could you expand on that aspect, where it is stored and how is it stored?
Yep.
The data for the cloud specifically.
I'm going to struggle a little bit. So you can, using our cloud, you can use a private data connection. So you can sort of further encrypt the connection between us and you. You can obviously get this, that's the streaming gone. Get the software and run it yourself somewhere if you want to. I don't honestly know how we would manage putting the thing in the cloud of your region for you. We're kind of a big team. It's a wide subject area. I'm from sort of applications, so I'm not the best person to help with that, but I can try and find out, and we can get something back to you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? There were hands. Hand at the front. Here we go. Coming around. Just getting my steps in. For you.
I just got about low-key. It makes me think I've been grateful logs that are well labeled. So tracking this list is absolutely brilliant. I was wondering how it compares to other solutions like that. That just I could obviously just general log data. How local compares to just unlabeled data, that very unstructured data.
Not entirely sure, because that's not been my focus since joining. But yeah, as I understand it, Loki does well when you can label things. I came from a database solution in a previous job that you just basically throw anything at it and it builds massive indexes for it, and then the index becomes a lot bigger than the data. As I understand it, we're not aiming for that, so we're aiming for some level of scalability. So I don't want to speak out of turn, but I would guess it would be useful to know, for you to know a bit about what you're putting in there and how you might want to use it, rather than expect it to be some general purpose magic box that you put things in and then we figure out how we want it later. We do have folks on our team who specifically deal with Loki, so we can point you at them and suitable resources.
Sure, it's a reason that's I'm trying to decide which solution to go for Loki, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got choices. We've already got some incumbents, and it's whether they would work well with the other bits of this.
Right. Yeah.
Not all our data is well labeled.
Right. But yeah. The other thing is your mileage may vary. It's open source. You can go try it if you want to, but obviously that's an investment in your time.
Thank you. Good question. Are there any more? Is there any more? Can't see all the hands. Nope. I think there's one from online, which I'm going to just quickly dig up. Let's see. Let's see. This laptop is my one. What have we got online? Where is even the right tab to go? That one. Chat. Let's see. Yeah, this question. Why do you think observability is so elusive, is the question. It's quite an open-ended question.
Let's see. I'll hold this. I'm talking to the online people. I think I'm fairly new to this, but I think it comes back to that cloud native compute slide with the bazillion logos and boxes and everything. I've been doing software development for about 35 years. Things have got incredibly simple and the Lego bricks are a lot bigger and you can do a lot more with them. But the complexity has become that there's so many of them, and then they all run concurrently and in real time with random dependencies on each other. So I would say it's fairly elusive because of the surface area you've got to cover. Yes. And things are helping with that because, things like the Python runtime has observability capabilities built in. Node.js has it built in. People are starting to do this now. So you don't have to, you can bake stuff into the application if you want to, but you can also use your runtimes solutions for it, which I think are starting to help.
Sounds good. I would say it depends on what you're trying to build as well. If you're buying off the shelf stuff versus bolting together stuff that exists, versus building something from the ground up. I started my career as a software tester, and our issue was always there was never instrumentation, so the product couldn't spit out logs, metrics, and traces in enough volume in the right places for you to tell when it had fallen over, why it had fallen over, and at the same time, obviously, you're extending the capabilities of the thing.
Yeah, and then we only sort of briefly touched on it in this talk, and I sort of brushed it off because it's not the point of this talk. But we do also do front-end observability because a lot of what happens in your application, of your data center, it's in someone's browser in a bunch of JavaScript that you've shipped to them. So we can also do that and bring all of that data into a standard thing. And that I think is helping because you can test and mess around with APIs and you can test and mess around with front ends, but someone's always going to have that browser that does that weird thing or something. Standards are your friend and standards are also not your friend in that case.
I couldn't agree more. Let's see if there are any more questions in the room. Silence. Thank you very much, Simon.
No worries. Thank you very much for coming, everybody.
Thank you. Before we go, one final slide, if my clicker's working, which is not this slide. I'm going the wrong direction. So that is this. So if you've enjoyed today, we have a stream of events always, and this is one of the bigger ones. We run sort of every 6 months or so, a larger sort of community-led conference, which is more like a full day's worth of free content focused around Atlassian stuff, typically, and adjacent tools. We have our next one coming up on the 13th of October. This is a whole day event, and this one's focused around developing apps in and around Atlassian. So think Forge, also think AI, think things like Rovo, and we've got all of the good and greats from Atlassian flying over. So we've got some quite high-fluting speakers in this lineup, which is really cool. So this is on the 13th. Please do give the QR code a scan for the sign-up page. It's completely free to attend. And Stuart will hit me for not remembering the location, but it's central London and it's quite nice. So I would definitely recommend it. Not that I'm biased at all. I'll just give you a moment to scan the QR code, of course. But yeah, it's a full day's worth of developer-focused and AI-focused Atlassian content in London. Ooh, weird bing bong. And wrong way. And before we go, final scan of our LinkedIn page, which is where the previous slide and all other things go. So if you're interested in this event and future instances of what we do, this is the place to go and find out about it. So all that's left to do is to say thank you very much, Simon, and thank you very much, everybody, for coming. There are a few drinks and a few nibbles left if you're in the room. If you're online, thank you for joining us. Until next time, thank you very much.
Try not to damage these.
The many mics.